Hi, I'm Shimelle Laine. Thanks for joining me here at True Scrap for my workshop, Creative Stash Diving. We're going to look through ways to get the most from your scrapbooking supplies and stretch your stash. Whether you're somebody who scrapbooks as soon as they get home from the scrapbooking store, or whether you like to shop a little more than you actually get time to scrap, I hope there's something in the next 6 steps that will help you get the most from your supplies and enjoy your pages along the way. So I hope you enjoy.
So there are 6 steps to getting the most from your supplies, and anybody can make it through 6. So let's start at the beginning with step 1. Use it while you love it. Now, there's a story to this, and if you've been reading my blog for a long time, you may already know it, but I think it's important. I call it the story of the special paper. And basically, when I was a student here in the UK, I was on a student budget, but I was also a scrapbooker. Supplies were really hard to find here, and when they did appear, they were pretty expensive. This was a great many years ago. There was a beautiful new paper line that had just brought embossed patterns to the scrapbooking world, and everyone oohed and awed over one paper in particular. And that was mostly all we did because it was several pounds per sheet, and the idea of actually cutting up such an expensive and treasured piece of paper just seemed terrifying, like we might get everything wrong and never be allowed to scrapbook again. So one day, I actually found this paper on sale. On sale, people. It was still £2 a sheet, which at the time was just shy of $4 American. But that was a huge discount, and it was the paper everybody was talking about. So I bought it. In fact, I bought 10 sheets. And for several months, I would start to make a page with that paper, and then partway through I would decide, no, this page is not special enough to deserve the special paper. So I'd put my special paper away. And no matter how many photos I tried, none of them seemed like they would ever do this paper justice. And so it sat, lingering in my stash, 20 whole pounds out of my student budget, just sitting there in paper form, blocking my every creative thought. Eventually, that paper got stuck at the bottom of the pile, and I conveniently forgot about its entire existence. Several years later, I found it, and immediately remembered how much I'd invested in those 10 sheets and how I could never find anything special enough to deserve that special paper. And you know what? All I could think when I looked at that special paper was how entirely ugly I thought it was. Really ugly. And there we go. The most expensive paper I had ever purchased. I loved it so much that I kept it for something special. And before something special enough ever existed, I couldn't stand to look at this stuff. This is the very definition of a waste of money. Now, I keep those 10 sheets of paper as a reminder. Use it while I love it. When I buy supplies, it's because I love them. And if you're buying supplies you don't love, you may want to think about that. There's plenty of stuff out there. Just pick what truly speaks to you. But use it while you love it, and don't let it become those 10 expensive sheets of super ugly paper. Every photo you scrap is special. Every page is worthy of the supplies you love. Anytime you find yourself saving supplies for some unknown special project, remember this. If it's in your albums, you can look at it forever. If it's in your stash, you'll only find it every time you tidy up, right along with the guilt for buying something and then not using it. So step 1 is easy. Stop saving your supplies for a rainy day and use your stash when it's new and exciting and fun for you. Which brings us to step 2, when we actually start doing some stuff. It's time to get your stuff together. What I ask is you give this process a try just once. It's a basic framework, and it's kept simple on purpose so you can tweak it to suit you. For this first go-round, follow my suggestions, and then when you start again, you'll know exactly what you want to add, subtract, and change to what I started with. First of all, make sure your desk is clear. No bits and pieces left sitting around, because it helps to have a start and finish point, so a clear desk can be that signal. From there, head to your stash and assemble some basics. I start with a selection of cardstock sheets for page backgrounds, some neutrals like craft and gray, and a few splashes of color like pink and yellow. This is one area you're allowed to add to as you're working because you might find your supplies stretched to even more pages than this. In the end, I actually added 2 more sheets of cardstock and a blank card to what you see here, so I had 9 sheets in total. Then assemble some pattern papers. I like to mix and match manufacturers, but I find it helps to take 2 or so papers from a collection at a time, so there's always something that will match. I chose 8 12 by 12 sheets, 2 from Echo Park, 4 from My Mind's Eye, and 2 from Crepe Paper. So that's 8 in total. So I have 8 patterns to work with, but actually they're all double-sided. So in truth there are 16 patterns. And the reverse of all these papers creates a very different color palette, so there's lots of potential combinations. We'll also need some lettering, so I've chosen 2 alphabets in black since that will match with most things. It's useful to have 1 large and 1 small alphabet so you can fit your title in a variety of spaces. Then we need some fun stuff, embellishment. Some stickers and die cuts are great for catching the eye, and a few of these will also work as titles. All of these items are flat embellishments. And then we also need some texture, so here are the last few items I've added. I love using white paper flowers because they can be colored to match any layout using paint, spray, ink, or pen. The same goes for the chipboard butterflies. They can be left plain, colored, or used with stickers from my pile of flat embellishments. This is the other category that can easily be added to. I don't tend to add buttons or brads at this point because they're easier just to add at the end of a page than guess exactly what color I might need from the jar before I've planned the pages. Ready to start scrapping? We're up to step 3 and it's time to be brave. Remember, no paper or embellishment is too special for your pages.
Once you have all your supplies chosen and set aside, whether you pick them yourself or they're from a kit, then the next step to do is one that's a little bit brave. But if you trust me with just one set of supplies, I'm sure it will work for you. So here's what we're going to do. Take your cardstock that you're going to use for page backgrounds and set that aside, because those are all going to be kept as whole sheets, and whether you decide to crop them a little bit later is fine, but we know at the moment we're planning on these as our page backgrounds, so they're going to stay in one piece. And then have a look at your pattern papers and see if there are any of your patterns that really speak to you as a whole page rather than being cut into pieces. So have a look and see if there's anything that makes you say, actually I want a whole page on that. And for me, it's this one, which is a gray tone-on-tone dots. So I'm going to take this one that's a full page and I'm going to set it with my cardstock because that's not going to get cut into smaller pieces. The rest of this, however, is. So now I have 7 pieces of pattern paper and I'm going to cut it all up. So the first step is to go ahead and take all these little strips off the bottom, and then we're going to cut them into a variety of large blocks. So let me just illustrate with one page first, and I'll show you a few different combinations of pieces that will fit. So first we'll take off the brand strip at the bottom of the page, which leaves us with the 12 by 12 sheet, and then we're going to take this into some smaller pieces. Now you can do lots of measuring if you like, or you can do them all by eye, and I tend to do a little mix. So this is going to be roughly a 4-inch strip on one side, which leaves me 8 on the other. And I'm going to take this 8-inch strip and do the same again. So I've got about 4 and 8. So now I have this piece cut into 3. That's about fine for now, so I'm going to set that one aside and go to the next paper. Now, one thing we're going to do is a double page spread. And for that, we're going to want some blocks that are going to go all the way across, and they're going to need to be wider than the 12 inches because they're going to have a 24-inch canvas. So for this one, I'm going to measure so that I can make sure they match up on both sides of the double page spread. And what I want is a box that's 5 inches high. So I'm just going to go to the 5-inch mark and cut 2 5-inch strips. They're the full 12-inch width, which then gives me the 2 pieces here that are going to line up. So I can use them like this, and I'll end up cropping some of this off later, but they're going to stay like that for now, which then gives me 1 piece left that's 2 inches, and this piece, I'm not going to cut the branding strip off just yet because it's got the pattern on there. So I'll go ahead and keep that one as a full sheet as well. So then the rest of these, I'm going to just carry on doing that. So sometimes I'll measure and sometimes I won't. And I'm going to end up with everything in a big stack of rectangles. I'm not worrying about cutting things into too small pieces at this point. Some strips that are quite narrow will work well, and some smaller boxes, but remember, we can cut lots of things into smaller pieces later. So for the moment, I'm taking things down not much smaller than this size, which is roughly around the size of a 4x6 photo. So you can see that's about the smallest piece I'm cutting from the paper at this point. And you're going to repeat this with all of your pattern papers, except that one that you, or any others that you put aside for using as a full page. Sometimes you can go with the pattern that's on the paper. This is a nice vertical design, or it's vertical if you look at it this way. So it's good to keep a few long strips of that pattern paper rather than all boxes. So I'll do 2 of those, and then I'll do some boxes here. Now, the reason this is a little scary is because I know this isn't following any sort of guideline. It's all kind of loose and haphazard, and what if I needed a bigger piece later? Even if you do, you'll make it work. It'll be fine. So I'm just going to have a variety of sizes. And this way you're not intimidated by the pattern paper. There is no way that anything is going to be able to make you say, oh, I'm going to save that paper, because it's already chopped up. So that's all my pattern paper cut up, and now I've got this as my stack of paper instead of all those 12 by 12 sheets. Now, there's no way I'm going to save any of these for a special project. I'm going to keep scrapping until this is all gone.
Step 4 brings us to our first page, and we're going to start big. If you're going to use all of the supplies you've chosen, it makes sense to start with the biggest project and work down to the smallest, so you know you'll have enough paper to finish each piece that you start. In this case, it means starting with a double page layout. Even if you're not usually a 2-page scrapper, try one double pager and see what you think. Every once in a while, you'll find something you love when you try something new, so it's worth doing at least one double-page spread a year, even if you usually love single-pagers. And actually, the inverse is true if you tend to love your double-pagers too. Many years ago, I only scrapped in double-page spreads, and I always started with 2 full sheets of a pattern paper, but that feels like eons ago. Now I tend to only buy 1 of each sheet, so I stretch my papers to cover the full space of a 12 by 24 canvas. It's just a case of working with blocks of paper and stretching them across the center join of the 2-page backgrounds. It's handy to have 2 pieces the same width at the full 12-inch length so they can be trimmed just slightly to create one block that crosses the full layout for a unifying anchor of color or pattern. Everything else can be smaller blocks placed either side or across the center of the layout. With the basic paper structure in place, have a look for the best spots for your photos, fine-tune and adhere those pieces. I often find it best to bring things closer together than I might first think, and in the end, I liked these photos in a line rather than scattered around the page. From there, add a title, journaling, and some embellishment. Keep in mind that you can come back to this layout if you like. In fact, when I really want to stretch my stash, I make several pages up to just a basic structure, and then I go back and add all the details, adding more to each page until it feels finished. Just remember to start with the biggest projects first, and you'll have plenty to go around. Then we're on to step 5, and it's an easy one. Keep scrapbooking. There's a sub-rule here, though, and it's one of balance. Embrace variety, but repeat what works. I often hear scrapbookers say that they want to make every layout look unique, or at least that they don't want to flip through their albums and have several layouts in a row look too similar simply because they were using the same supplies. There are a few things to consider here. One is that if you choose photos from all different events and store your photos in albums by theme or chronology, you won't have that effect with several matching pages in a row because they'll be spread all over your albums. The second is that if you use different combinations of the papers and the designs, your pages won't look overly matched anyway, and it would take a keen eye to notice your run of several pages. So we can definitely embrace variety while working within the set selection of supplies. But it's never worth reinventing the wheel for every single layout. Sometimes you'll have a brilliant idea that you can't wait to try, but other times you'll want to happily craft along in territory that seems familiar. There are things that work, and those should be repeated. In fact, those are the things that make your style your own. I repeat embellishments that I like, especially butterflies, and I love scrapbooking with 4x6 photos, especially in pairs. So those things crop up again and again on my pages. That's my familiar territory. Whatever yours may be, don't be afraid to repeat it. I promise each page will still look unique, even if you're roughly repeating a design concept. So in this stage, we keep right on scrapping, working down from the biggest projects to something smaller like single-page layouts. One of these layouts has a pattern paper background instead of cardstock. That's another little test for you to decide which is the best move for you in the future. If you like scrapbooking with the pattern background, then adjust the quantities of solid versus pattern in your next assembly of stash. If the pattern paper background isn't for you, then you can chop all your pattern paper into boxes next time around. And step 6 is even easier. Just craft until there's nothing left. You may find your cardstock pile is gone, but you still have a fair amount of pattern paper. If that's the case, restock your cardstock and carry right on. Even if your papers are odd shapes, you can find designs that will continue to use those smaller pieces, like punching a big stack of circles to make a dotted page. Big impact, very little stash. And of course, you can use smaller pieces on cards, tags, or notes to a friend. It doesn't matter what you choose to craft, just that you try to keep going until you can't make anything else with the leftovers. You can even stick stickers to envelopes or lunch school bags if you fancy. It totally counts as using your stash. Remember, you can also keep returning to your other layouts throughout this step, adding smaller details by punching papers from the small scraps or cutting strips for journaling. Remember when we chopped up all those papers in step 3? All those chopped up papers created a total of 8 single-page layouts, 1 double-page layout, and a card with a matching envelope. And here's all I have left: an alphabet that's nearly devoid of vowels, a handful of flowers and butterfly stickers, and the smallest of scraps from my original papers. Now, you may find at this point in time that you want to go back and add more detail with supplies that you didn't originally pull from your collection, and that's absolutely fine. I haven't shown those steps because each of these layouts can be considered complete, and if you want more detail, fair enough, go ahead and add it. But at this point, you'll see that you've gotten so many pages from the original supplies that you set aside. And sometimes I might only get 2 or 3 layouts had I not been trying to stretch those supplies so far. So to be able to essentially get 10 really means that I'm putting my investment to work and getting lots from it. But one other thing I want to do is show you just one little bonus tip for each page that I created. So the first one here is the double page, and this is one we covered before. To cut boxes of pattern paper and spread them across the center divide of a double page spread in order to get the most from your paper across 2 whole 12 by 12 pages. There's really not all that much pattern here, and yet you can see lots of color and pattern. On this layout with the chicken, my tip here is to use paint to make things coordinate. I didn't actually pull any red paper, then there was that lovely red brick. So I just took a plain one of the pattern papers and I used red paint over the top so that it would match. And the flowers were the white flowers, which have been painted yellow here. I did add some brads to finish those off. And now here's the next one. For here, we're looking at the very top of the page. To create a cluster like this takes very, very little supplies. And in fact, these were all pieces left at the side of my trimmer, with the exception of the thicker numbers. So you can create little clusters either on the edge or anywhere around the page, just with little bits and pieces that you would normally just push into the recycling or the bin. Here, the two landscape photos go all the way across the page, so there's no need to keep the pattern paper all the way underneath and just cover it up. So there's actually just one strip at the bottom and one strip at the top, and then the additional strips of the gray pattern paper. So be careful, be thinking ahead with borders and strips. If you really want to stretch your papers, don't waste too much going underneath the photos. Just keep the bits that are going to be on show. How about letter stickers? I always find that I get to a point where an alphabet isn't really very usable because there are certain letters that are missing. Well, here's a good trick, and that's to take any letters that you can flip upside down or trim to make them work. So this N in Honolulu is actually a U, and both of those L's were actually the number 1 because I was out of both N and L, and it works fine. On this page with Paris pictures, I love how just a tiny little strip of pattern paper at both sides of the page takes what would be a really quite boring layout and just gives it a little bit of something, some interest. So take a look at tiny little pieces of pattern paper that could have great impact and use them as borders to keep your eye in the center of the page. And on this page, both the doily paper and the orange block that's underneath the title, both of them were just a little bit smaller than what I wanted to do. Remember back when I said, when we were cutting paper and I said you might freak out that your paper won't be big enough? Well, here's what you do. Cut it and stretch it. So I just ran the trimmer and then spread the two pieces apart so that it would be the size that I wanted it to be, and it works with a little design detail. Here, this page has very little on it because the photos do most of the work. It's just two strips of pattern paper, one either side of the photos. I used a border punch down the right-hand side, and then there's a few little extras with the title, the journaling, and the little date embellishment in the bottom corner. This is one that I might go back and add something to. I'd quite like to stitch the edges of the paper down and see if that adds enough detail for me. On this page, it's definitely a reminder to punch your scraps to create a pattern. This is just a plain 1-inch circle punch, and it creates something completely different from all the other pages by having all those circles, but those were all cut out of tiny little bits and pieces that were left over in offcuts. I've also just splashed a bit of paint over quite a few of the pages, so you'll see that repeating. And here's the last one. Consider smaller paper projects. You might not be into cards, you might love making cards, but consider different things you can make that are smaller, even if you're just making some embellishments that you could then put on another layout on another day. If you still have supplies left over, just keep going and see if you can create something else. So here it's a congratulations card. Thank you for joining me for some creative stash diving. I hope you enjoy getting the most from your supplies by using what you love, being brave enough to cut everything into pieces, and then just carry on happily scrapping until everything is gone. There's a PDF you'll be able to download at the end of this video, so you can keep these tips near your crafting space if this is something you really want to embrace in your scrapping. If you've enjoyed this class, I'd love for you to stop by my website, Shimelle.com, where I blog and teach online scrapbooking classes throughout the year. Stop by and say hello. I'd love to see you in class again. Thanks again, and happy scrapping!